All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of The Arena. Today I've got a special guest, Spencer. Spencer, we consider him the business alchemist here, who's really just known for taking unique visions and transforming them into actionable steps and then bringing that to reality. So we'll be diving in on this topic of how we go from taking ideas, bringing them to life, and how you actually feel good throughout the entire journey. And so rather than speak more about Spencer, let me introduce you to him. Spencer, welcome onto the show, man. It's a pleasure to have you on here. Just give a
Thanks
little
for having
bit,
me.
of course, man. Just give a little bit to the audience about a little backstory of how you got into business and really doing what you do now.
Yeah, I kind of came out of the womb as an entrepreneur. I started my first organization when I was 9 years old. I built a game to hustle people at bowling alleys and then taught that to other kids, and then they paid a 30% rev share. And we had everything from and responsibilities, and we built a clubhouse, and we had budgets and meeting notes and everything like that. So yeah, it really was born just thinking about how to put together organizations, and I just love doing cool shit with awesome people. And so from there, I was in the fitness industry for 10 years, wrote a couple books, started a personal training concept, and built a custom CRM based in 2002. So that was a little bit more complicated than it is
Yeah,
these days. Uh, Consulted in everything from companies like Honeywell all the way to marijuana consulting companies, bringing the medical marijuana and regulations to the United States as that was coming up. And now I basically am a paid thinker. So I'm basically good at solving really complicated problems in different arenas, whether that be personal, business, starting a company, scaling a company. And I've arrived to my final dream, which is just to be a consultant on whatever projects I find interesting, man.
right. I love it, man. I think every entrepreneur starts as a hustler when they're young. They're the kid who's selling candy or
Right,
just figuring
right.
out how to get money from their friends to pay for themselves.
Yeah, it starts with money making clubs, and then we kind of never grow out of it, right?
Right. Yeah. I had a similar start as a young kid. I would sell candy out of the locker in school. So yeah, well, man, it sounds like you've definitely mastered the art then of taking ideas and then transforming them into reality through proper operational methodologies. Can you kind of walk us through your approach of reverse engineering complex problems?
It starts with a vision, right? And a lot of what I see a lot of mistakes, as I'm helping people like trying to understand their vision, is they actually have a goal, which is different than a vision, right? I want to have a $10 million exit. I want to build a company to 7 figures, 8 figures, 9 figures. And when I know that it's going to be a rough road or it's actually not going to happen, is when I ask the question of like, once you accomplish the thing you set out to accomplish, like, what is it for? If
Right.
you can't answer that question, you just want to build $100 million company, then th- there's nothing but ego driving it. So you better have a lot of ego,
Right.
right?
Yeah, it's
So it
like
just
good
comes
luck.
down to, yeah, right. It comes down to like, how do you want to live? And a big realization for me was, when I moved to Costa Rica, I partnered with the company. My operations company got acquired. I was living the dream, working 10 hours a week and just chilling. I realized a couple things. Like one, it did not take me $10 million to achieve that dream. So,
Right.
and two, uh, I don't really want to retire. Like it's a
Yeah.
myth. Like I want to chill every now and then, but I just love solving complicated problems. So,
Yeah.
that so it really starts with a vision of like how do you want to live? Because that's what it comes down to. Accomplishments come and go. They're cool for
Right.
like a month or two. And so, yeah, you got to have that vision.
Yeah, so I love what you're saying because obviously it all starts with reverse engineering from like the feeling you want at the end of all of this, which you said after exiting the company, you realize like you still want to continue working. Why do you feel like humans have that desire to keep working even after you've achieved said result that you thought you wanted maybe a couple years ago? Like what's still driving you?
What's still driving me, or what drives humans in general? Are you
What's your
asking?
perspective on it in general?
I mean, humans are like watching people's like watching an ant farm.
Right.
Like you see a bunch of ants in there just like going to work, doing stuff, and it's like, what is it all for? Like they're building all their tunnels in tubes. It's like species are designed to work. They're
Right.
designed to contribute. They're designed to build. They're designed to create. And once you stop creating, you stop living. And
Right.
once you stop living, you lose purpose. And you'll notice a lot of people when they retire or they lose their spouse and there's kind of nothing left to live for, their will to live goes away and then they pass on. And so it's our contribution that we make to each other and to the generations that will come after us that is actually what is giving us life. So
Right.
you stop contributing, you stop living. And that's
Yeah.
why vision's more important than accomplishment, because as soon as you make that accomplishment, it's in the past
Right.
and you got nothing left to be excited about.
Yeah, yeah. I think at this point in life, like I've personally summarized, the whole purpose of life is to make a contribution to the progressive advancement of society, right? And so when you really think about what's left when we leave this planet, really all that's left is the impact that you made on the world, right? And it wasn't even
Yeah.
for you because you leave it behind. So when
Right.
you think of like human evolution, the reality is all of us are just working to make the world a better place and then we leave. And the people who benefit are the people who come after us. And so that's why I really like that you think like that. So let's say you've got your purpose figured out, right? What do you feel like then is essential components or quote unquote like the DNA of successfully operationalizing the business?
So I used to think that it was coming up with a system that's scalable, and
Right,
that's true. But what precedes that is the people in your organization, most importantly, the leader of the organization, is effective themselves. And so this is more of like a bottom up approach
right,
to getting shit done than a top down. Top down would be like, all right, what's the vision of the CEO? What are the goals? You create your OKRs, your objectives and key results. And then that breaks down into projects
right,
and tasks, right? When I go into an organization, I don't speak to the CEO first. I speak to all of the VAs, workflow managers, assistants, and the people that have the tools in their hands that are actually building the shit, right?
right,
And I have them take a look at their calendar to make sure that they are allocating their attention to all of the things in their life, not just their work, but specifically their work, right? To make sure that they're living in a way that is contributing to the business, but also to themselves. Because when you have the people at let's just call it the bottom of the pyramid of the operational pyramid that are in really precise execution inside and outside of work, it takes care of a lot of those managerial issues and things slipping through the cracks that you think that a system is going to solve.
right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. So then where do you feel most leaders go wrong when it comes to leading their team?
Not having their shit together themselves.
Right,
I see this all the time, man. Like, especially a company or a CEO that is trying to scale to the next level, right? There's particular stages in business growth. The
right,
first one is like you want to get to that $10,000 to $25,000 a month. After that, it's kind of like the 50 to 100, 200 a month. And then beyond that, you're looking at like an 8-figure company. When entrepreneurs get to that point where they're doing a few $1 million a year and they want to scale to the next level, they're looking below themselves and or not below themselves, but looking below in the organization, trying to find the efficiencies when they themselves are like are playing whack-a-mole all day and just solving problems, as opposed to building out the way that they live through their calendar. And by calendar, I simply just mean like the ledger of which you manage your attention,
Right.
right? Uh, Not like an appointment book, right? When you build it around the way that they want to live and what they should be focusing on, it then informs how you build out, their operator, their project manager, their marketing manager, their sales manager. And that's where I take the top down approach from there. But yeah, if the CEO or the founder, leader, whatever, isn't operating at their highest level of execution, uh things start to wobble underneath
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
So a lot of
I
times you don't need a VA. You just need to learn how to get shit done in this new
right.
level you're trying to
Yeah, I
accomplish.
see this all the time at these middle levels where people are trying to push from a couple million a year to 10 million. A lot of entrepreneurs, I think they see success and they kind of like lay off the gas pedal or they stop personal development. And so just the other day, we was talking to a client and it's interesting to see how they're looking down at the team and they're seeing like who can be better, who can, and the thing I always reflect back to them is like, dude, you're the Bill Belichick of the team. You're the head coach. And the second that you stop growing and you stop showing up and educating yourself, reading, reflecting on where you can be better, the company starts to stagnate or even contract. And it's so funny because I think as humans we tend to look for where the responsibility falls on other people, and we don't actually look at like where responsibility falls on ourselves and how we are responsible for the situation that we're facing in the business, right? So how do you then, like, with that said, how do you anticipate where there can be downfalls in a business? Like, if you're looking into a business as a consultant, how do you kind of anticipate or navigate where you feel there would be constraints?
If a company's scaling from 7 figures to 8, the first thing I look at is communication. Like,
Right.
where is the communication being bottlenecked? Because, you go from like a 3 to 7 or 8 person staff to all of a sudden, when you include all of the contractors you have and everything, there's like 25 or 30 people. And what happens is the communication from the top doesn't quite get to who it needs to get to, right? It goes to your executives, and it goes to your managers, and then it goes to the people that are doing the execution. And it's this game of telephone that ends up just scattering the message, or it's not as precise as it was from the top. And
Right.
so I take a look at the things that communicate concepts and like the way that the business runs, like your accountability chart, your org chart, your RACI chart, roles and responsibilities. And I go from there, and then I start taking a look at like your meeting schedules. How are you taking notes? Where's that information that of those expensive discussions, because that's all that meetings are, right?
Right.
Just like super
Right.
expensive discussions on a regular basis. Where is that information going? Is that going into a project management system? Is it going into a WIP report? Is it going into a excuse me, a Slack channel? And so once I can see that, then I can start to see like why things aren't getting executed on time, or that there are, you go to build a funnel and there's just, it's just riddled with errors and, through miscommunications. And so if you can create a system that is transparent and information doesn't need to be actively communicated in order for people to receive it, and they can see what they want when they, or what they need to see or understand, in real time, then communication can happen instantly. and the company can move and communicate at scale. It's really about communication at
Yeah.
scale.
Right. That's that's a really good motto. Communication at scale. Then you've
Yeah.
exited a company, you said. So can you walk us through then, like, what is really important for those people listening who are thinking about exiting a business or preparing? Like, what is most important when private equity firms or investors are looking at the company from the outside?
Yeah, so my company got acquired, which is different than an
Right.
exit, right?
Right.
An exit is more so like you get the check and then
Yeah.
you're off into the sunset. Whereas an acquisition is like they're essentially buying all of your ideas, they're buying your team, they're buying your book of business. So then they can basically take that business that you built and implement it as a new piece of the machine,
Right.
right? For a bigger business. So just to be clear about my personal, uh,
Yeah.
acquisition, but what they're looking for is essentially the same. First of all, if you want your company to, if you want to sell your company, whether it's a acquisition, acquire, exit, whatever, you have to have clean data. Like if you don't have clean books, if you don't have a clean data, it's going to be really tough to sell your business. Like you better have like an incredible book of business or some kick-ass IP, because without the numbers, it's difficult to determine the value of the company. That
Right.
that's first and foremost. Um, Next is infrastructure, because you got to be able to pass that company off to somebody else eventually and have them be able to run it. And that was the thing that my company had, that was its strongest attribute, was the infrastructure. I mean, we were only doing seven figures. I had built that company in 16 to 18 months before. I mean, it was only 15 months before we did like our first equity deal. And then 3 months after that is when it got acquired. When they took a look at our book of business and took a look at our infrastructure and the way we ran things, they were like, "You've got the infrastructure of like a mid eight figure company, and you're
Right.
not that big yet." It turns out that's the thing that made it desirable,
Yeah.
because it was like we were just a small ops company of a team to five to six people,
Right.
and then it got acquired by a holding company that had a marketing agency, a sales agency, a sales center training program, a sales education program, and so they were able to place that infrastructure across all those companies. um,
Right.
and then finally, like if you want to have an exit, like you need to know what type of company is going to buy your company. So if it's a company that's going to be like utilizing your technology within theirs, that's different than if it's a PE firm that is just looking to acquire your company and then do what they can to improve it and then sell it in 3 to 5 years, for 4 to 5x what they paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I like what you mentioned about having the stability or the infrastructure to handle the growth. I think that's where a lot of people fall short is they just try to scale so fast that they get caught up in the fancy term of scaling. Like, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs who feel so driven on the marketing and sales side and think that that's just going to propel their growth?
Man, especially the entrepreneurs that kick ass at marketing and sales,
Right.
they are the hardest to work with, because we all know how it is in the
Yeah,
industry,
no,
man.
and
Like,
it happens because
everyone.
I am like this myself. I think marketing and sales just solves everything, and I never like I am always the person who has an idea, wants someone to execute it, and moves on to the next thing. And I've seen how that manifests into problems, right?
Right. Yeah. It's sales and marketing is everything until it becomes the biggest problem in your business.
What do you
And
mean by
so,
that? Yeah,
well, okay. So let's just take a basic kind of like a training program, right? So you've got a basic training program. You've got a $5,000 to $15,000 offer of coaching, group coaching, whatever that may be, right? And let's say you've got 200 active clients, company's going really, really well. Uh, if sales solves all problems, then okay, rub the genie, and I'll give you 500 more clients tomorrow.
Right.
What you gonna do, right?
Yeah.
Because now you have to onboard 500 people. You've got to collect all of the data and all of the processes that it takes to onboard all of those people at one time. Do you have enough staff for that? Are your systems automated enough for that? The amount of customer service requests that you're going to have, or just reach outs or chargebacks or refund requests, like if we were to give you 3x the business that you have right now instantaneously, what would break, right? And so there are amazing marketers out there that can maybe not have that happen instantly, but can do it in a couple months.
Right.
So it's like, at what point will this machine break, and what inside of it will break? And with entrepreneurs that are really driven and very focused on sales and marketing, the problem isn't that they take their foot off the gas. The problem is that they don't turn the wheel. So they just keep going
Right.
straight down that path. And it seems absurd in their mind that they invest in infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times the reason that they're so hard to work with is because they think that solving problems is just about more cash. And the way that they think about spending money is merely on ad spend or
Right.
sales reps. And when it's like, no, you need to pay $100,000 to build out a SQL database, or an advanced ERP system. Like it's like, well, what's my return on investment in this? And it's so much more difficult to calculate the return on investment of building out a system than it is to, scale your ad spend, right?
Right.
Going, well, we do Facebook ads, now we're going to do YouTube. What's the return on investment going to be? That's easy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's more so
Like you
like,
said,
oh,
most
go ahead.
people
Sorry.
just floor in one direction. I actually know someone who scaled their company from about 15K a month to 1.6 million at the peak, and pure sales guy, runs everything off paper and notes, right? And the issue was, couldn't handle enough the clients that they were bringing on, and didn't have the infrastructure to fulfill on all of it. Man, faster than he went up, he went down. Tons of lawsuits.
Right.
So,
Oh, dude, like, so the problem lies in the language that you use, right?
right,
We all speak English, but we speak a different dialect, right?
right,
And this, my encouragement to all entrepreneurs is, stop using business words that aren't accurate. For
right.
instance, when people are like, "Oh, I'm the CEO and founder, but there's only 4 people in the company," you're not a CEO. Like, oh, like, like, do you understand the real job of a CEO? Like, oh, I'm the CFO. No, you're the bookkeeper. You're not the
Right,
CFO.
right.
Like, no,
I'm
no,
the
you're not.
CEO
So,
of a two-person company, right?
right, no, you're the operator of the company. You're the project manager. So so when you said you've got a friend that scaled a company from whatever it was, 15,000 a month to 1.5, 1.9. That's not scale. That's growth. And
Right,
there is a very distinct difference between scale and growth. And so people think they're scaling when in fact they're growing. And once again, like, if I call a spoon a knife and I try to cut with it, it's still a spoon,
right.
right? So,
Yeah. So
right,
so you distinguish then, I like that you mentioned that. You distinguish the difference between growth and scale. Growth is getting to a certain point where the infrastructure is in place so you can actually handle scale. Because scale, the way I interpret it, is like your foundation is solid, you can actually scale this machine. Growth is you're incurring a lot of pain getting to the point where you can actually scale. It's not going to look as
Yeah,
pretty.
right. I mean, growth is the have you ever seen the rings of a tree, right? You've got the white part for the summer months, and
Yeah,
that's where
yeah, yeah. I
it
have
gets
seen.
its size. And then you got the dense parts of the rings, which is where the tree gets its rigidity, right? Too much growth, tree tops over. Too much rigidity, it never gets big enough. Like it's strong, but it never gets big enough to be anything,
Right.
right? And that's the difference between growth and scale. And so with growth, it's about cash. Like how much cash can we generate? With scale, it's about stability. It's like how stable can we be in the midst of this growth? And what scaling is when you are able to have multiple offers, multiple marketing drivers, multiple products, and be able to have departments that can run in lanes but not silos. And that tends to be the issue in that phase of growth to scale is like in the growth phase, it's okay for like the sales to be on one page and the market to be on another because you do all team meetings and everyone
Yeah.
gets to talk. But then you start getting departments and they're running in a vacuum.
Right.
Sales doesn't know, marketing doesn't know what sales is doing. Sales doesn't know what delivery is doing. Delivery doesn't know what ops is doing. So
Yeah.
everyone's looking at their KPIs and not seeing the whole story.
Right.
And so it's really about the dissemination of information.
Right.
When you're working on scaling your company, you're opening up the communication of everything that's going on so everybody can work in unison.
Yeah,
That
which
requires
comes
structure.
back to, like you said earlier, transparent communication across the board, like the ability for everyone to kind of see and know what's happening at all times. Um, so then how do you distinguish between, you're talking about like rigidity and stability, how do you distinguish between, or how do you separate from someone overbuilding in the beginning to make things perfect, but also going too fast and trying to grow too fast and then not actually having anything and then everything crumbles eventually?
It comes down to the data. So just for entrepreneurs individually, for your company, there needs to be a vision, right? And then a goal that once you accomplish that goal will provide all the all the things necessary for that vision. And from there, it's your OKRs, your objectives, and your key results. Key results are measurable, right?
Right.
So if you're building an infrastructure that doesn't support one of those objectives, then you shouldn't be doing it. That's where a lot of operators run into issues. Is like, oh, we should move from Asana to ClickUp. We should move from this platform to that platform.
Right.
You're just being an artist and a perfectionist
Right.
that wants to build something stable. Where the revenue side gets it wrong, it's like revenue at all costs, and then you start to see your sales numbers slip. You start seeing your retention slip. You start seeing more refunds and chargebacks and customer service calls. So on an ops side, we take a look at the KPIs of activity, both internally and client facing, to see what needs to be given attention.
Right.
So if you're getting a lot of customers, you got an uptick in customer service requests, and you have an uptick in the amount of meetings that everybody's having. So that's an external internal
Right.
example. Well, we know that there's some things that are bottlenecked. So you go and investigate and clean those things up there.
Yeah, because I know that there's some people listening right now who maybe in the earlier stages of business, I think is where a lot of people get stuck, where they're wearing multiple hats. And how does one navigate in those earlier stages where cash is super important, but they don't have the resources yet to really deploy in team members building infrastructure? And so I think they negate trying to do anything themselves, like no onboarding process for clients, no customer retention, no feedback loop in general, like practically no processes right in the beginning stages. We've all been through that. where you're really just focused on like staying alive, staying in the game. How do you
Right.
balance between the two in those earlier phases for those listening?
Yeah, I mean, it's an 80-20 split. When entrepreneurs are starting out and they're trying to get to that 10K or to that 50K a month mark, you do wear a lot of hats, but they tend to not wear all of them. So
Right,
spend 80% of your time in
right,
revenue generating mode. Spend 20% of your time in infrastructure.
right,
And where you should start is building out the roles of your company, starting with yourself. There's a difference between a job description and a role,
right,
right? So if you want to hire a COO, which is basically the person that is running your company, right?
right.
They might carry on the roles of a project manager, of an operations manager, of an HR manager. In a larger company, those are three separate jobs, if you
Right.
will. So a job is just a series of roles. So
Yeah.
I would start with, like, if you're a solopreneur, is start documenting the roles that you have and all the responsibilities that go along with those roles. And at first, it's going to be this giant document, right, of
Right.
all these things. And when it's time to hire somebody, then you'd be like, all right, I don't want to do this role. I don't want to do that role. I don't want to do that role. That becomes a job description. Then that becomes the way that you measure your next hire. And you build that into your ecosystem. You build that into the culture that you're documenting your roles down, and that will set you up to scale.
Yeah.
The When I go into companies, man, it's like I'm like, show me your accountability chart, and by the time that you're doing, 100,000 a month, things are moving so fast that it seems like a waste of time, but it's absolutely
Right.
necessary and mission critical for scale.
Yeah. I've actually seen maybe through some entrepreneurs who don't want to like put themselves in a box, they avoid writing certain roles down for themselves because they don't want to take on the identity of like I should be the CEO, I shouldn't be the project manager, or I shouldn't be these other things that they have to wear in the beginning. And so they literally neglect having that entirely in the company. What I think they don't realize is like this is dynamic. You're almost in a phase of like do whatever it takes still. And it is a
Yeah.
dynamic process, like you said, where over time you're almost like dragging and dropping onto someone else's plate. Um, well, I want to kind of pivot into my favorite part of these types of talks where we actually dive into more of like the brain of the person behind the ship, right? Or steering the ship. The whole concept of the arena is every day we're battling for greatness. And so through that we emerge with, strategies, beliefs, etc. What do you feel like has been some beliefs or perspectives that have guided you through the journey of mastering operations and really living life by design?
Consciously creating whatever vision you have, whether it's professional, relational, personal, it can even be with your health. It all starts at awareness.
Right,
And a lot of people think that they've got a scaling issue or a motivation issue or a strategic issue. You have an awareness issue.
right,
So I was in the fitness industry for like 12 years, right? I was a bodybuilder when I was a teenager. I was a three-time author in the fitness industry, and over COVID, I had gained like 34 pounds,
wow,
and I was struggling to get my body back. And so I go work out. I come up with this plan. I hire a chef. All this stuff. You want to know what really does it?
what was it?
Weigh yourself every day, and if that doesn't work, weigh yourself before you decide to eat something.
Right,
Now that's not gonna stop you from that's no particular plan or strategy. It's just awareness. Like,
right,
I got up over 200 pounds. So it's like having to look at that every single day will tell you who you are and what it is that you want.
right,
But we avoid taking a look at what really matters, like our awareness of like truly where we're at and what we're doing with our lives, that stops us from achieving anything.
Yeah.
And so like what I do every single week is every hour of my day is accounted for.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean I always execute everything that I plan, but if I plan to work out at noon, but I got caught up in building out a system for a couple of hours, I will move my workout block to 4 o'clock, and I'll fill in exactly what it is that I did. So I can go back for week after week for months and know exactly where my attention was going.
Yeah.
And so doesn't it so when I used to go in and coach, I'd want to know what your vision was. I'd want to know what your goals are. What are your values? Like, what's the identity that you need to embody? You don't really need to tell me any of that stuff. Show me your calendar. Show
Right.
me where your attention's been going. I'll tell you what your goals are. I'll
Right.
tell you what your values
Right.
are. And so not paying attention to your personal resources is the thing that gets you in trouble.
Right.
It's the thing that gets you in trouble financially as well. Is like, I've
Yeah.
definitely worked with companies where it's like we're making $2, $3, $4 million a month and it implodes. And it's like, well, where did all the money go?
Right.
You weren't being aware of that either, you know?
Yeah. No, every quarter, I think I do this personally, and we recommend a lot of companies do this, is every quarter we do time studies across the executive leaderboard or leadership, which is like every 15 minutes walking around with a piece of paper and pen. And sure, if I go to the gym, I just mark off an hour, right? But I think that brings another level of awareness because a lot of people think, I work 40 hours and then I sleep 56 hours. Well, it's like, where's the other 75 hours, let's say, right? Like, there's a lot more time than we think. And I just think it
Right.
gets lost because we don't effectively manage the time, like you said. And so,
Totally.
yeah, that's super key. From there, though, you said the awareness is the most important thing to live life by design. Like, how do you know, at least in your perspective, how do you know when you're not in alignment, really like doing things the way that you want? What does that kind of look like in your reality?
It's simple. When you're taking actions that aren't aligned with the identity that's required to achieve the goal and vision that you want. And
Hmm.
it's like the human identity is liquid. It's always
Yeah.
changing. And the
Yeah.
version of yourself that is required in order for you to build that new vision needs to be stated, right?
Right.
So if just like vaguely put, if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, what I have people do is I'm like, I want you to say that out loud, and on a scale of 1 to 10, tell me how much you believe that to be true. And you say
Right.
out loud, I am a successful entrepreneur, that scales companies. It's like, it feels like a 6, right? So it's
Right.
like, and you got to be honest, right? A 10 out of 10 would be, the how certain you are in hearing your own name, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, all right, 6 out of 10. At the beginning of the day, I would say, well, what opportunities do you have today to demonstrate that to be true? Well, I could do some reach outs. I can, create my job descriptions. I can, whatever actions that a successful entrepreneur would do. At the end of the day, I ask a simple question. You say that you are a successful entrepreneur and that's the identity that you're embodying. What did you actually do today that demonstrated that to be true? And then you reflect on your day, take a look at your
Yeah.
calendar. Oh, well, I did a podcast. I wrote a post. I did this, and give me all the evidence. And then once you've identified and brought to your consciousness, your awareness of that evidence, you say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, when you say that out loud, I'm a successful entrepreneur. How does that feel? So, it feels like an 8. And so here's the thing is like when you are a 10 out of 10, you no longer have to motivate yourself
Right.
or inspire yourself to execute in a way that's going to build that goal. And so back to your question is like, how do you know? It's like, again, I'll take a look at your calendar and I saw that you watch YouTube for 4 straight hours. And I'll ask a simple question. How did that action support you in this statement of identity?
Right.
And so, yeah, your character is basically just a collection of identity statements. So it's like, well, what identity statement did this serve? Right.
Right.
And
So
so, yeah,
at the end of the day, it seems like what humans are really chasing is like creating an identity for themselves
for sure.
at the core essence of everything we're doing. Why is that like important for us as humans to feel a certain way or believe that we are a certain person?
It it gives us significance and confidence.
Right.
Like the most the all that confidence is like I am uh I have a certain level, or I have a particular level of certainty that I can do X, Y, and Z because I am who I say I am.
Right.
When you have integrity, man, like you walk in like you're 8 feet tall, right?
Yeah.
Because I am who I say I am. My word's my bond. And
Right.
so when we believe our own hype, that's what makes us that's what makes us feel great. And
Right.
although that is ego, like I feel good about me and my accomplishment, ego is not the enemy.
Right.
The over exaggeration and hyper obsession of ego can be the enemy. But it's very important for humans on one end to contribute, but on and have an impact on the world. But on the other end is to experience all the elements of life that you imagined and
Right.
creating a story about you that's left behind. And
Right.
so those two things are like the selfish and the selfless elements of consciously creating your life that make people excited to wake up in the morning, do the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah, what fascinates me is how interesting humans are because like we get to wake up, vision for ourselves, live a certain way. Through doing that, we conditionally program ourselves to be confident knowing that whatever next thing we want, we can achieve it. And at the same time, we get to do that because we're making an impact. So it's like you get to help people change their lives, and in doing so, you reinforce that you can do anything, and so you just get to live an epic life. Which brings me back to like you said, I think total alignment in business is summed up by like doing cool things with cool people. Um, and I think through the years of business, I think when you're able to get to that point, like creation just feels effortless, right?
Yeah, and it's fun too. And the the process of that journey requires the ability for you to consciously shift your identity based on the part of the journey that you're in.
Right,
Yeah, there's a younger guy that I mentor, and he's like, I just want to be paid to think and talk,
right,
and which is essentially what I do now, right? I
right,
don't have any particular niche. It's like various people with various problems, projects, and goals, right? And and it's like in order to be able to do that, you need to learn how to be a specialist in a lot of different areas. You need to learn a lot of different industries. And so, there was a point in time where I was building this in the cannabis industry, and I actually have a YouTube video how to make pot brownies. It was 420 the other day, and the owner of that company hits me up, and I think we've got like 2 or 3 million views on that video. But like for a little while, I was a marijuana chef, right?
right,
I had an underground Italian dining experience that was infused with cannabis called Cannabistro, and I ran that for a little while. So at that point, I was a scientist, and and on the then I was a consultant, scaling the communication to help people get their marijuana licenses, like the grow licenses and
right,
distribution licenses. So it's like it's learning how to be a specialist and shift the identity, and being able to do that across many different things is a different approach than just like do what you do best and be the best at it.
right.
But on some level, whether you have a single company, you're on working with multiple industries, it is about being able to shift that identity And that's really what entrepreneurs want is like, we love growth. We love change. We love shit we ain't never seen before.
Right.
And so it requires you to be a different person, you know?
Yeah, and I think to get to that also, like you were saying, it takes a lot of self-exploration. I think where most people get lost in the beginning is trying to like find your purpose too early on when you haven't really explored enough. I know like I've went through that and I still am going through different things where it's like today I'm gonna wake up and what superhero suit are you putting on today, right? And so for me, I'm entering a phase where like I have to learn content creation and I'm stepping into my content creator suit versus I've been used to being in a sales suit where I'm just this driven guy on the phone. Then it's the marketing or the consultant or the business strategist. And it's like there's actually a fun process of going back to sucking at something from the beginning, having to figure it out, and a couple years later you're like, okay, I've mastered this thing. And then you want to pivot or you got to or your business forces you to step into a new role, right? And then you got to learn something new from the start. I think that's just the journey that never ends. So never staying
Yeah.
like too rigid is how you get there.
Yeah, and there's something special and a bit sick about loving being the not the least smartest person in the room.
Right.
So right now, so through all of my journeys, I've ended up in private equity, and we're doing our first like 9-figure acquisition, right?
Right.
And we meet with these other private equity guys that are have a $1.5 billion fund to invest in health sciences and stuff. And I got onto that meeting. I mean, every person in their company is like in their 50s and their 60s, and
Right.
like their accolades are ridiculous. They're using acronyms that I don't know. And I said to my buddy that, or my colleague, who's my friend too, I I was like, hey, what did you think about the meeting? He's like, I have never felt like I could not contribute in a meeting before. And I was
Yeah.
like, I know, it was so nice for a change, wasn't it? Like, you got no idea. You're starting to sweat a little bit when you're called on. You're like, shit, I hope I don't sound stupid. It was once I experienced that meeting, it like ignited this thing in me that had kind of been dormant for a couple years because I've been spending time in my mastery for,
Right.
the past 2 or 3 years. It ignited something that was like, oh, I need to go, I need to research, I need to seek, I need to learn. And I started feeling like I was 20 again, you
Yeah.
know? And so if you can't handle the feeling of being the dumbest person in the room, yeah, you might want to reconsider your career
Your journey,
choices,
right.
right?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's important because I think when you master something, there's very incremental growth where a lot of the information you might read or hear or see is very similar. But for example, like stepping into content creation, it's like everything is new to me, right? And so you get to learn the cool thing is it fuels you so much more because it's, in my opinion, like you see development at a rapid pace. Like when you're
Right.
picking up a new skill, your first 100 hours, you learn so much more than the next 100, right? And so, yeah, it's funny you said being the dumbest person in the room. I kind of, I like that feeling sometimes where I think it's important to a lot of people, like, I think they try to talk too much, at least coming from a sales background. That's been the biggest thing I tell people all the time is like, dude, there's really like no reason you should be talking most of the time. Right? And a lot of times that when I leave, my cousin's my best friend is like the first person I call after going to a cool event or whatever. And we have this inside joke where I pick up the phone and I'm like, it's one of those situations, dude, where I just couldn't talk. Like I barely talked. And it's exactly what you said. Like he's been in a lot of rooms like that with me where he's just like, dude, I don't know what to say right now. And I'm just like, there's nothing to say. You sit and you learn and you observe. Right?
Yeah. That's a similar strategy that I have when I go into any type of networking events, like even the one that me and you met at. The first 2 days, like, no one knows who I am, what I've done,
Right.
what I can bring to the table, because I'm just listening.
Right.
right? It's like I'm there to learn from subject matter experts and stuff. And with the sales guys that we were talking with, that at the dinner, I think like the night before, they finally asked me like, well, what do you do? Like,
Yeah.
tell us to, you know, right?
Right.
His specific verbiage was, well, you're sizing us up. Who the fuck are you? And
Right.
so then I give 10 minutes of like, hey, here's what I've done, and these are the things that interest me and that I feel like I bring to the I can bring to the party as value. And he's like, why didn't you tell us this before? And I'm
Yeah.
like, I mean, no one asked, and I wasn't there to tell you anything. I was there to learn about what you guys. It was
Right.
we were in the we were in the sales conference. I'm not a sales dude, so like I wanted to know what you know.
Yeah. No, it makes you more interesting when you're the quiet person too. Like people come to you like, who the fuck is this guy? Haven't heard his name.
Right,
Right.
right,
Well,
yeah.
I think this is a good last thing to really touch on. Like I think through most people's journey, the way they come to this realization of like what matters and you know what like how to live life by design, you have to go through a lot of tough times, right? You really find yourself as you're doing a lot of difficult things that maybe you don't enjoy or um, like losing businesses, imploding businesses, etc. What was like a pivotal moment in your journey, kind of battling it in the arena, where you realized like awareness is the most important thing and really doing cool things with cool people is the most important thing? Like, where was that pivot in your life? What was going on?
In 2009, my fitness company that I had for 8 or 9 years imploded,
Right.
and I remember my business coach saying to me, like probably my second year in business, as I was like really trying to raise money to open up my first facility. He's like, "Why do you have this attitude that it's got to happen now or it's never going to happen?"
Right.
And my arrogant response was, "My attitude is this has got to happen now. Not that it's not or it's not going to happen. No, it's going to happen." And
Right.
and I just like I pushed. And when I reflect on that company and the companies that I've built since then, you take a look at the through line, and it's not I realize that it's not the hey, we did $50,000 a month, all these accomplishments. It's the meetings we had after work where we're drinking a beer or smoking a joint, and having conversations and really diving deep. It's the early morning conversations that I had with clients because my trainer called in sick, and I told him that, hey, if you're ever sick, I'll take your shift,
Yeah.
right? And so when I realized, it was at that point, at that terrible failure, that I'm $500,000 in debt and my dream just blew up in my face, and I'm only 25, 26 years old,
Right.
right? What is that? It's like, no, it's not about it's not about what it is that you've accomplished. It's like what you're doing in that process. And so that changed my whole mindset from accomplishment to experience. And so now the way that I qualify business is not by primarily is how much money can this make me. It's,
Right.
do I enjoy this? do
Yeah.
do I like have sending text messages with this person on the weekends? Like, do we
Right.
have fun when we meet? Is this someone that I want to meet in person, and I want to go do some excursions and have dinner and go
Right.
out and have fun with? So it's really about building relationships and telling stories, man. And
Yeah.
if it ain't gonna be a good story, and it's not gonna warm my heart in the relationship, like, eh.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I think a lot of people too, like you said, we all go through that arrogant phase where it's like we're so rigid on this thing has to work right now. And what sometimes you miss is like, what if I have to let go of this thing to really reach the next level? And so sometimes I do think having a certain confidence factor in what you're doing is important, but it's also not being so rigid on this is the only way, because you never know, what if the universe is guiding you to a better way that's going to make you a lot more money, and you might miss the whole thing by being afraid to let go of what you have now or the current identity you have now. That's super, super important. And then the second thing is you were talking about, what was it? You were mentioning like there's a certain feeling that I think entrepreneurs go through when having to shed layers that is very difficult, that I think we try to run away from that uncertainty or that fear that we face when we're sitting in this new exploration realm of shit, this is uncomfortable, or what does it look like on the other side if I let go of this business. I think you have to be willing to just explore in that. Recently, I've upgraded my perspective of that to really believe like uncertainty is possibility. Um, there's room for new growth. There's room for new perspectives, and allowing that is a superpower. When you're able to find like comfort in the discomfort, man, as a leader, I think you have so much more power to really grow the business or grow your life.
Yeah, completely, man. And it really it comes down to this, and when you're in the place in your life where you're transitioning from one level to the next, it's like going from being in eighth grade to being a freshman or being a senior and going to college. It's like, yeah, you're the boss right now, but
Right,
next year you're gonna be a twerp. You're gonna suck. And so it's like, man, this wearing this new hat, this new identity, I feel weak. I feel dumb. I feel like I suck. And it's
right,
like that's what you should be gravitating towards. And it's like the fact that you were so good at what you were at is what got you to this level. You actually have to let go of the feeling of being the best.
right.
And and that's so hard. And so that's why it's important for you to have a healthy relationship with growth and ego, right? Because if you
Yeah,
can't handle sucking, well, then enjoy the plateau. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I'm not bashing that, but it's like dynamic growth can be real tough, real tough.
yeah, yeah. I want to end it with this. For I know in the beginning we started talking a lot more about like operations and taking visions, turning them to reality. Now we're talking a lot more about the personal identity. Um, Holistically looking at this question, like how do you maintain the balance between being creative, like allowing for creative freedom in yourself, but then also being highly systematized to be able to take vision and bring it to reality efficiently over and over again?
Yeah, the answer to that's kind of nerdy, which is like you've got to have your 3 year vision, you got to have your 1 year goals, you got to have your quarterly plans, you need to do your monthly check-in, you need to do your weekly action planning, because balance is so temporary.
Right.
it Balance is a dynamic game. So it's like it comes down to the question is like, what is required in order to meet this objective that achieves my goal, that creates my vision. Then through reflection, you can see where you need more structure and where you need more kind of like freedom for creativity.
Yeah.
And so it really comes down to that game of awareness. And there are some times where you're stacking meetings in your schedule, and then there are other times where you've got like a 4 hour time block where it's like you're gonna take a walk, or do some
Right.
chores or go for a run, where you can just let your brain think.
Yeah.
And so the art of determining what's required from you and how you go about allocating time for that is that process of self reflection and identity work.
Yeah. And would you say like by default humans have something inside of them that can guide them to the best next step?
Absolutely. And unfortunately, like the way that we use language is makes it very difficult to determine what that next step is. But once you get very clear as to 5 simple things, like what is it that you want, what's the next step, or pardon me, what do you want? What's standing in your way? What's the next step? Once you know that step, how might you fuck it up, right? And then what identity do you need to embody in order to have that thing that you want? If you
Right.
can answer those questions, then you'll know that the next step and the strategy to get to the next step. And as long as that next step is in the direction of your North Star, it's only a matter of time before you succeed. It's
Right.
only a series of iterations. Once you're aligned there, then we could talk about strategy of how do we start collapsing that timeline,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, that simple, really.
Yeah, and like you said, it's iterations. I think a lot of people, let's say, they might listen to this and do this thing once, whip out a piece of paper, they do it once. It's like this is a constant thing in your life. I don't think that ever ends. You're constantly sitting there reflecting, was I embodying the identity that I'm trying to become today? Are these actions that I'm taking aligned with my North Star? Like now that I just went through a 3 month sprint, okay, what's the next 3 months look like that's still in alignment with the North Star? And a lot of people, like, they think that this is like too simple to really win the game. But it's
Right.
funny, like the more that I've grown, the more I've realized like finding time to just sit alone, um, finding time to really like think and be with yourself, like get really comfortable being with yourself, with your thoughts, with your the crazy thoughts too, like the ones where you feel like, oh, I'm self-sabotaging myself, or like, why am I so hard on myself? It's allowing those to all exist is where you find the answers you're looking for. A lot of people just are not comfortable sitting in that, and they're looking for answers outside of them.
Totally.
And I'll share something that I've recently been doing that some people might find a little interesting. I actually have a running Google Doc that I whip out and I use it as like self therapy. Or I used to do it on paper, but I've realized like I can type a lot faster. And it's just me with me, but like one version of me is someone on the outside. It's me talking to myself as if I was like an outside coach, because I think that like I know what's best for me and I know how to align my incentives with the future self that I'm trying to create better than anyone else. And there'd be way too much time spent explaining to people over and over and over again like what it is you want to. So I've just come to a point where it's like, you know what you need to do. You whip out a paper. It's, hey, this is how I'm feeling today. Here's the thoughts I'm having. Drop a line. Other version of me. Oh, okay. So what do you mean by that? What exactly are you afraid of? Drop a line. Oh, well, I'm afraid of this. And like letting your own creative power guide you
Right.
to solve any problem you want in life. It's like a fucking superpower.
Yeah, I love that you said that. Literally right next to me is, I think this is my 13th edition of my notebook, where I have just like I literally have 12 or 13 of these, front, side, and back, where it's next to my desk all the time, where I'm putting down those thoughts as well, because the mentorship is a when you receive guidance from other people, it really is just a suggestion. But if you don't know your own data, your internal data, your thoughts, your emotions, like your identity, what's going on with you, then it's like asking me for directions to my house, but I don't know where you're starting at.
Right.
So how
Yeah.
do I possibly give you? I can give you, like, as you get close to my house, I can start telling you, oh, you're going to see this on the highway, and then you're going to turn left. Costa Rica, there's no addresses, so
It's just a pinpoint.
so right,
Latitude,
yeah,
longitude.
right, and landmarks next to the next to the yellow sign, big palm tree, uh, and so the person that knows themselves the best is not one that doesn't need guidance. It's the one that can utilize the guidance the best. And
Right.
so that's where it starts, with that awareness, as it kind of bring it full circle to the beginning of our conversation.
Yeah, I like you said, it's taking on more inputs, I think, makes it harder when you don't even know what's going on in here. And
Makes it impossible.
right, but when you know what's going on in here, like you can leverage everything outside of you to just enhance exactly where you know you already want to go. And I think that's a great place kind of put a pin on the convo. This was super insightful, man. For those listening, obviously, I hope you got tons of value. Spence, what do you like? What's your future projects that you're really excited about moving forward that people can follow you on your journey?
Yeah, so two main projects right now is one in the private equity space. I'm running a private credit fund where we take service-based businesses and give them additional funding to scale their ads. So if they're getting
Right.
like a 4, 5, 6 row ads, we can come in and scale those ads and also help them with the experience that we've had in buying and selling and growing companies, help them through the process of scaling. So coming in as smart money,
Right.
right, to help them get to that next level. And then the coaching business that kind of like started it all, right, which is basically the coaching that I would do to help people become more aware, that eventually turned into this ops company that got acquired and all that stuff, is I've started a small mastermind that right now is just in beta. Like I'm actually not even charging for it right now because I want to do it for the love of the game. You know, I've got the business side and then like the creation side. And so that company is called Brain Jam. And so we're revamping that up and just taking our time with it. But follow my journeys easy on Instagram. Just go to Spencer Burnett is my handle. One word, Burnett. And yeah, other than that, like I've received DMs and that, no real marketing, no
Yeah.
anything like that. I'll tell you what, man, I haven't I actually I recorded before we hopped on. I haven't had to do content in like 2.5 years. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
It
It's been great.
right. I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, it just shows that what you do is good work. And for those who are wondering if there's any value that Spencer can bring to your business, obviously there'll be links around this video or wherever you're watching this or listening to this to get in touch for potential collaboration. But dude, it's been awesome jamming away together on all things related to scaling businesses, building solid infrastructure, and then living life by design. Um, Definitely love to have you back on the show in the future talking about acquisitions and private equity. I think that'd be a great convo, but it's been an honor to have you on, man.
Thanks, brother.
Take care, fellas.